Rebecca had driven this route 1,000 times before. The highway from her office to their little house on Maple Street was as familiar as breathing. She knew every exit, every curve, every spot where traffic usually slowed down. After 8 years of making this same drive, she could practically do it with her eyes closed. But that's the thing about life. The moment you get too comfortable, everything can change in a heartbeat. It was a Tuesday evening in late November. The kind of evening where darkness falls too early and makes everything feel a bit sadder than it should. Rain had been falling steadily since noon, turning the roads slick and reflective under the streetlights. Rebecca had stayed late at work finishing a project, texting her husband Michael around 6 to let him know she'd be home by 7:30. He replied with a heart emoji and said he'd keep dinner warm. She was thinking about Michael as she merged onto the highway, probably smiling to herself, the way people do when they think about someone they love. They'd been together for 9 years, married for 4, high school sweethearts who actually made it work, which felt like winning the lottery these days. Her best friend Amy always joked that they were disgustingly happy, the kind of couple that made single people want to throw things. The traffic was lighter than usual for a Tuesday. Rebecca had her windshield wipers on full speed, fighting against the sheets of rain. The radio was playing some pop song she didn't recognize. She was in the middle lane, keeping a safe distance from the car ahead, doing everything right. Everything a careful driver is supposed to do. She never saw the truck coming. Later, witnesses would tell the police that the semi appeared to just slide across the median, like it was made of ice instead of concrete. The driver had hit a patch of standing water and lost control. 40 tons of steel and cargo moving at highway speed, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Rebecca only remembers seeing headlights where headlights shouldn't be. Bright and blinding and coming straight at her. Then the sound, a sound so loud it felt like the whole world was ending. Metal screaming against metal, glass exploding, her car spinning, and then nothing. The highway patrol said she was lucky. If the truck had hit her head-on instead of clipping her rear quarter panel, she wouldn't have survived. But luck is a strange word when you're lying unconscious in a crushed vehicle, while strangers try to pry the doors open. When paramedics are checking your pulse and shouting medical terms that sound like a foreign language. When they're loading you into an ambulance with sirens wailing into the rainy night. Michael was making spaghetti when his phone rang. Their cat, Mr. Whiskers, was weaving between his legs hoping for an early dinner. The pasta was almost done. He'd opened a bottle of the red wine Rebecca liked. He was happy. Completely, blissfully unaware that his entire world was about to shatter. The voice on the other end was calm but serious. Professional, the kind of voice that's been trained to deliver bad news. There'd been an accident. His wife was being transported to County General Hospital. He should come right away. The woman on the phone wouldn't say more than that. Couldn't say more, probably. But Michael knew from her tone that it was bad. He doesn't remember the drive to the hospital. Doesn't remember turning off the stove or grabbing his keys or getting in his car. His body just went on autopilot while his mind screamed at him that this couldn't be happening. Not to Rebecca. Not to them. They were careful people. Good people. This was the kind of thing that happened to other people in news stories, not to a 29-year-old woman driving home from work on a Tuesday. The emergency room was exactly like every emergency room in every movie, but somehow worse because it was real. Bright fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. That awful hospital smell of disinfectant trying to cover up something darker. People crying. Machines beeping. A television in the corner playing the news with the sound off. Michael gave Rebecca's name at the desk. The nurse looked at her computer screen and her expression changed slightly. She picked up a phone, spoke quietly to someone, then told Michael to wait. A doctor would be out to speak with him soon. That's when he knew it was really bad. They only make you wait for doctors when the news is too complicated for nurses to deliver. He sat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs and tried to pray, even though he hadn't prayed since he was a kid. Tried to make bargains with God or the universe or whatever was listening. Tried not to think about what his life would look like if Rebecca wasn't in it. The doctor who finally came to get him was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. Dr. Martinez, she said. She led Michael to a small private room, which made his stomach drop even further. Nothing good ever happened in small private rooms in hospitals. Rebecca was in surgery, Dr. Martinez explained. The collision had caused multiple injuries, but the most serious was a traumatic brain injury. Her head had struck something during the impact. There was swelling, bleeding. They were doing everything they could, but the next few hours were critical. Michael asked if she was going to die. Just said it straight out because he couldn't stand not knowing. Dr. Martinez paused before answering, choosing her words carefully. Rebecca was young and strong, she said. The surgeons were excellent. But with brain injuries, there were no guarantees. Even if Rebecca survived, they wouldn't know the full extent of the damage until she woke up. If she woke up. The doctor didn't say that part, but Michael heard it anyway. The surgery took 6 hours and 14 minutes. Michael knows because he watched every single minute tick by on the waiting room clock. Rebecca's parents arrived around midnight, her mom's eyes already red from crying. Her brother came an hour later. They sat together in silence, mostly because what was there to say? They were all thinking the same terrible thoughts and hoping the same desperate hopes. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the surgical wing, still wearing her scrubs, they all stood up at once. She looked tired but not defeated, which Michael took as a good sign. The surgery had gone as well as could be expected. Rebecca was stable. She was alive. But then came the words that would haunt Michael for months. The damage to her brain was severe, particularly in the areas that controlled memory. They'd done everything they could, but there would be consequences. When Rebecca woke up, if everything went according to the best possible scenario, she might not remember recent events, might not remember the accident, might not remember the last few years, might not remember him. Michael heard the words but couldn't make them make sense. Dr. Martinez was still talking, explaining about temporal lobes and neural pathways and recovery possibilities. But all Michael could think was that his wife, the woman who knew him better than anyone, who could finish his sentences and predict his moods, who had promised to love him for the rest of her life, might wake up and look at him like a complete stranger, and there wasn't a single thing he could do about it except wait. They moved Rebecca to the intensive care unit after surgery. Michael wasn't allowed to stay with her at first. Hospital rules. Only 10 minutes every 2 hours. He used every single one of those minutes sitting beside her bed holding her hand, talking to her even though she couldn't hear him. The nurses said it might help. That coma patient sometimes could sense when loved ones were near. She looked so small in that hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed and kept track of things Michael didn't understand. Her head was wrapped in white bandages. There were bruises on her face, dark purple and yellow, making her look like someone he didn't quite recognize. But her hand felt the same. Still soft, still fitting perfectly in his. Days blurred together in that hospital. Michael took leave from his job at the accounting firm. Couldn't imagine sitting at a desk doing spreadsheets while Rebecca fought for her life. His boss understood, told him to take all the time he needed. Rebecca's mom brought him changes of clothes and homemade meals he barely touched. Her dad kept trying to convince him to go home and sleep properly, but Michael refused. What if she woke up and he wasn't there? On the 4th day, her eyes moved under her eyelids. The nurse got excited about this, said it was a good sign. Michael leaned closer, squeezed her hand a little tighter, and whispered her name. Nothing happened. But still, movement was something. Movement meant her brain was working, fighting, trying to find its way back. Dr. Martinez stopped by every morning. She'd check Rebecca's charts, examine her responses to different stimuli, and give Michael careful updates that never promised too much. The swelling in her brain was going down. That was good. Her vitals were strong, also good. But the memory issue remained a question mark. They wouldn't know anything until she woke up. If she woke up. Michael kept thinking, even though everyone said when. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the accident, when Rebecca finally opened her eyes. Michael had been dozing in the chair beside her bed, his head resting on the mattress near her arm. He'd barely slept in 14 days, Ronnie. Hung on nothing but coffee and fear and stubborn hope. He felt her hand move first. Just a small twitch, but enough to jolt him awake. Then she made a sound, soft, almost like a question. Michael's head snapped up, and there she was, looking at him. Actually looking at him with those brown eyes he'd been dreaming about for 2 weeks. "Rebecca," he said, his voice cracking. Tears were already streaming down his face. "You're awake." "Oh God, you're awake," she blinked slowly, like the light hurt. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Her throat would be sore from the breathing tube they'd only removed 2 days ago. Michael reached for the cup of water with a straw that the nurses kept filled. He held it to her lips and she took a small sip. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was rough, barely audible. Then she looked at him with an expression that made his heart stop. Polite, confused, the way you might look at a helpful stranger. "Are you one of my doctors?" Those 6 words destroyed him more completely than any car accident ever could. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This was the moment he'd been dreading since Dr. Martinez first warned him. But hearing it, seeing that blank politeness in Rebecca's eyes where recognition should be, was so much worse than he'd imagined. "No," he managed to say, forcing his voice to stay steady. "I'm Michael. I'm your husband." Rebecca's eyebrows drew together slightly. She looked at him more carefully, like she was trying really hard to see something that wasn't there. "I'm sorry," she said, and the apology in her voice made everything worse. I don't remember you." The nurses came in then, responding to the alert that Rebecca's vitals had changed. They fussed over her, asked her questions about what day it was and where she was. Rebecca knew she was in a hospital. She knew her own name. She could remember her childhood address and her parents' names. She knew she was 29 years old, but the last 7 years of her life were just gone, erased, like someone had taken an eraser to the most important chapters of her story. Dr. Martinez arrived within 20 minutes. She was gentle with Rebecca, explaining what had happened. The accident, the surgery, the brain injury. Rebecca listened quietly, taking it all in with a calmness that felt wrong somehow. She should be panicking, Michael thought. She should be crying or screaming or something, but she just nodded and asked practical questions about her recovery. When Dr. Martinez mentioned that Michael was her husband, Rebecca glanced at him apologetically. "I'm sorry," she said again. I don't remember getting married. I don't remember meeting you. The last thing I clearly remember is graduating college and moving into my first apartment downtown. That was 7 years ago, before they'd met at that coffee shop where she'd accidentally grabbed his order. Before their first date at the Italian restaurant that gave them free dessert because they looked so happy. Before he'd proposed on the beach during sunset, so nervous he'd almost dropped the ring. Before their small wedding in her parents' backyard with white string lights and her grandmother's roses. All of it, gone. Over the next few days, Michael tried everything. He showed her photos on his phone. Hundreds of them. Pictures of them together, smiling, kissing, being stupidly happy. Rebecca looked at each one carefully, her face drawn with concentration and something that looked like guilt. "That's definitely me," she'd say. "And you look nice. We look happy." But it was like she was looking at pictures of strangers. No spark of recognition. No rush of memory. He told her stories. About how they'd met. About their first kiss in the rain outside her apartment. About the time they'd gotten lost on a road trip and ended up in that tiny town with the amazing pie. About adopting Mr. Whiskers from the shelter. About 1,000 little moments that had built their life together. Rebecca listened to all of it. She was kind about it, patient, clearly trying her best. But Michael could see it in her eyes. These were just stories to her. Interesting, sure, but no different than if he'd been telling her about characters in a book. The worst part was seeing her try so hard. She'd study his face like she was searching for something. She'd close her eyes when he talked about their wedding, like maybe if she concentrated hard enough the memories would appear. Sometimes she'd apologize over and over until Michael had to tell her to stop because it wasn't her fault. But Rebecca felt like it was her fault. Here was this man who obviously loved her desperately, who'd spent 2 weeks sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair waiting for her to wake up, who looked at her with so much pain and hope and longing, and she felt nothing. Well, not nothing exactly. She felt grateful. She felt bad for him. She could see objectively that he was attractive and seemed like a good person, but her heart stayed quiet. No flutter when he smiled. No warmth when he held her hand. No sense of home when he was near. Just polite fondness for a stranger who happened to be her husband. The neurologist, a serious man with thick glasses, explained that this type of memory loss wasn't uncommon with temporal lobe damage. Sometimes memories returned gradually. Sometimes they didn't return at all. Forcing it wouldn't help. The brain had to heal in its own time, in its own way. They needed to be patient. But how do you be patient when the person you love most in the world looks at you like you're a stranger? How do you keep hoping when every day brings no change? How do you hold on when the woman wearing your wife's face can't remember why she married you? Michael didn't have answers to any of those questions. He just knew he wasn't giving up. Not on Rebecca. Not on them. Even if she couldn't remember their love, he'd remember enough for both of them. He'd wait as long as it took, even if it took forever. 6 weeks after the accident, the hospital finally cleared Rebecca to go home. Home. The word felt strange to her because she didn't know where home was anymore. The apartment she remembered living in, the one from 7 years ago with the leaky faucet and noisy neighbors, wasn't hers anymore. She'd apparently moved out of there years ago. Her home now was a house she'd never seen before, with a man she didn't remember marrying. Michael pulled up to a small blue house with white shutters and a front porch that had 2 rocking chairs. There were flower beds along the walkway, empty now because of winter, but Rebecca could see the remnants of what must have been a garden. A wreath hung on the front door with their last name on it. Henderson. She was Rebecca Henderson now, not Rebecca Chen like she remembered. That took some getting used to. "Take your time," Michael said softly as he helped her out of the car. She was still moving carefully, still healing from the physical injuries. Broken ribs, a fractured wrist, cuts and bruises that were finally starting to fade. But the brain injury, the invisible wound, that was the one that really mattered. Walking into the house felt surreal. Like being on a movie set of someone else's life. The living room had a comfortable-looking couch with throw pillows that Rebecca apparently had picked out, but couldn't remember choosing. There were bookshelves filled with books, some she recognized from college and some she'd never seen before. Photos everywhere. Her and Michael on a beach, at what looked like a Christmas party, holding a fat orange cat, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. "We went to Paris for our honeymoon," Michael said quietly, noticing her staring at that photo. "You'd always wanted to go. We spent a week there, got lost about 100 times because neither of us could read a map properly." Rebecca nodded, trying to imagine herself in that moment. Trying to feel something. But it was like looking at a stranger's vacation photos. The worst part was the bedroom. Michael had clearly prepared for this, trying to make it less awkward. "I set up the guest room for you," he said quickly. "I didn't think you'd be comfortable. I didn't want to assume." He trailed off, looking miserable. "Thank you," Rebecca said, and meant it. The idea of sharing a bed with this man she didn't know, husband or not, felt impossible. The guest room was nice, simple. A bed with a blue quilt, a small dresser, a window that looked out over the backyard. It would do. They fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Michael would make breakfast every morning. Simple stuff. Toast and eggs, coffee exactly how Rebecca liked it, which was weird because she'd never told him how she took her coffee, but apparently, he just knew. He'd go off to work at his office while Rebecca went to her therapy appointments, physical therapy to get her body working right again, occupational therapy to relearn basic tasks that her brain had temporarily forgotten, and the worst one, cognitive therapy, where a too-cheerful woman named Dr. Stevens would show her pictures and ask her questions and try to unlock memories that seemed determined to stay locked. Evenings were the hardest. That's when the silence became too loud. They'd eat dinner together at the small kitchen table, and Michael would try to make conversation. He'd ask about her day, tell her about his. He was trying so hard to be normal, to not make her feel pressured, but Rebecca could see the sadness in his eyes every time he looked at her. Could feel the weight of his disappointment even though he never said it out loud. Sometimes he'd start to tell her something, then stop himself. She realized these were probably inside jokes or references to memories she didn't have anymore. He was constantly editing himself, trying not to say things that would remind her of what she'd lost. What they'd both lost. Rebecca felt like she was living in a museum of someone else's life. She'd find things in drawers that were apparently hers but felt foreign. A concert ticket stub, a birthday card with a love note written in Michael's handwriting, a cookbook with pages marked and notes in the margins in her own handwriting saying things like, "Michael's favorite," or "Made this for our anniversary." The cat, Mr. Whiskers, seemed confused by her too. He'd sit in the doorway of the guest room and stare at her like he was trying to figure out why she wasn't acting right. Sometimes he'd meow at her insistently, like he was trying to remind her of something. Even the cat knew something was wrong. Michael never pushed her, never demanded that she try harder or get better faster. But Rebecca could feel his pain anyway. It was in the way he'd start to reach for her hand, then pull back. in how he'd catch himself calling her babe and then awkwardly correct to her full name, in the way he'd look at her when he thought she wasn't watching, with this expression of such complete heartbreak that it made her chest hurt. The guilt was eating her alive. This good man had done nothing wrong. He'd been by her side through everything, patient and kind and never making her feel bad about something that wasn't her fault. And she couldn't give him the one thing he wanted. She couldn't remember loving him. Couldn't even pretend to feel something she didn't feel. She tried, though. Really tried. Would study the photos for hours, willing her brain to recognize something. She'd read through old text messages on her phone, conversations between her and Michael full of inside jokes and heart emojis and casual intimacy. She'd go through her closet and find clothes from trips she didn't remember taking, a sweatshirt from Niagara Falls, a t-shirt from some band she'd apparently seen in concert. Nothing worked. Her memories stayed stubbornly absent. 2 months after coming home, Rebecca was in the living room going through a box of old photos when she found their wedding album. It was beautiful. Leather-bound with their names embossed on the cover. She opened it slowly, almost afraid of what she'd find inside. There she was in a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, laughing at something off camera, and Michael in a gray suit, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Photo after photo of them looking ridiculously happy, dancing, cutting a cake, surrounded by people who were probably friends and family. A whole day of joy that had been important enough to photograph extensively, but meant nothing to her now. She was crying when Michael found her. Big silent tears rolling down her face as she stared at these pictures of a happiness she couldn't access. "Hey," he said gently, sitting down beside her on the couch. Not too close, always careful not to invade her space. "You okay?" "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. She'd been saying that a lot lately. "I'm so sorry, Michael. You seem like a really good person, and I can see that we were happy. But I can't, I know," Michael said quietly. "It's okay." "It's not okay," Rebecca said, getting frustrated now. With herself, with her broken brain, with the whole impossible situation. "None of this is okay. You've lost your wife even though I'm sitting right here, and I've lost 7 years of my life. I should be able to remember my own wedding day. I should be able to remember falling in love with you. But it's just gone." They sat in silence for a while. The wedding album opened between them, showing them a past that only one of them could remember. "Do you want me to leave?" Michael finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Give you space?" "I could stay with my brother for a while. I don't want to make this harder for you." Rebecca looked at him, really looked at him. At his tired eyes and sad smile and the way he was trying so hard to hold himself together, and she realized something. She might not remember loving this man, but she was starting to care about him, not in the way he needed, maybe, but in a way that made her want to try. "No," she said. "Don't leave. This is your home. I'm the one who doesn't belong here." "You do belong here," Michael said firmly. "This is your home too, even if you don't remember it." But that was the problem, wasn't it? How could anywhere feel like home when everything was unfamiliar? How could she build a life with someone who was essentially a stranger? How long was Michael supposed to wait for a wife who might never come back? Rebecca didn't have answers to any of those questions. She just knew that something had to change. They couldn't keep living like this in this awful limbo of politeness and sadness. Either her memories would come back or they wouldn't. Either they'd find a way forward or they wouldn't. But something had to give. 3 months had passed since Rebecca came home from the hospital. 3 months of polite conversations and careful distance. 3 months of Michael watching his wife live in their house like a guest who couldn't wait to leave. He was losing hope, though he'd never admit it out loud. It was a Saturday afternoon in early March when everything changed. Rebecca was at her therapy appointment, and Michael found himself alone in the house with nothing to do but think. Dangerous territory. He'd been trying to stay busy, to not dwell on everything they'd lost. But that day, the silence was too heavy. He wandered through the house, ending up in the living room where the piano sat against the far wall. They'd bought it 3 years ago at an estate sale. Some old woman had died and her kids were selling everything. Rebecca had fallen in love with it immediately, even though neither of them could play. "We'll learn," she'd said, running her fingers over the keys. They never did. It became an expensive piece of furniture that collected dust and framed photos. Michael sat down on the bench staring at the keys. He'd actually learned to play one song, just one, had taken secret lessons for 2 months before their wedding, wanting to surprise Rebecca. It was the song from their first date, an old jazz standard that had been playing in that little club downtown when they'd kissed for the first time. She'd loved it so much she'd asked the band to play it at their wedding. His fingers found the keys almost automatically. Muscle memory from hours of practice years ago. The melody started softly, hesitant at first, then growing stronger as he remembered. He closed his eyes and let himself go back to that night. Rebecca in her white dress, laughing as he'd spun her around the dance floor. The way she'd looked at him like he was everything. The promises they'd made. He didn't hear the front door open. Didn't hear Rebecca come in early from her appointment because the therapist had gotten sick. Didn't know she was standing in the doorway, frozen as the music filled the house. Rebecca had stopped dead in her tracks the moment she heard the piano. Something about that melody hit her like a physical force. Her chest tightened. Her heart started racing. And then without warning, tears began streaming down her face. She didn't know why she was crying. Didn't understand the overwhelming rush of emotion flooding through her. But the music. The music was doing something to her. Images flickered in her mind. Not clear, not complete, but something. A dimly lit room with small tables. The smell of cigarette smoke and perfume. Laughing, she was laughing about something. A hand holding hers, warmth, safety, joy. More flashes. Sunshine and flowers. The weight of fabric, something long and white. Music playing. This same music. Dancing. Arms around her. A voice whispering in her ear. Words she couldn't quite make out, but the feeling behind them was pure love. Rebecca gripped the doorframe to steady herself. Her legs felt weak. Her mind was reeling, trying to grasp at these fragments that were appearing and disappearing like smoke. They weren't full memories. She couldn't see faces clearly or hear words distinctly. But the feelings, the feelings were so strong they almost knocked her over. Happiness. So much happiness it felt like her chest might burst. A sense of being completely, utterly loved, of being home. Michael's hands faltered on the keys as he sensed her presence. He turned on the bench and saw her standing there crying, one hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to hold her heart in place. "Rebecca?" He stood up quickly, alarmed. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Just shook her head and gestured at the piano with a trembling hand. "The song?" Michael asked, understanding dawning in his eyes. Do you recognize it?" "I don't know," Rebecca managed to say, her voice shaking. "I don't know, but—" "Play it again, please. Don't stop." Michael turned back to the piano, his own hands shaking now. He started the song over and Rebecca moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. She stood right behind the piano bench, close enough to feel the vibrations of the notes in her bones. As he played, more images came. Clearer now. A man's smile, blue eyes. Michael's eyes, she realized. But not sad like they'd been for the past 3 months. Happy. Full of life and mischief and love. She saw those eyes looking at her across a table. Looking at her as she walked toward him down an aisle. Looking at her on lazy Sunday mornings, she saw moments. Fragments of a life. Making breakfast together, flour on her nose. Arguing about something stupid, then laughing about it. Holding hands in a movie theater, dancing in the kitchen, a ring being slipped onto her finger, vows being spoken, a kiss that felt like coming home. The memories weren't coming back in order, weren't complete stories with beginnings and endings, but they were there. After 3 months of nothing, they were finally there. Like the music had found a key that unlocked doors in her mind she hadn't known how to open. When Michael finished playing, silence filled the room. Rebecca was crying harder now, but it wasn't sad crying. It was the release of 3 months of frustration and fear and guilt. "I remember something," she whispered. "Michael, I remember something." He stood up so fast he almost knocked over the bench. What do you remember?" I can't explain it clearly. It's not like remembering what I had for breakfast. It's different. It's feelings more than facts. But that song," she pressed her hand to her chest again. "When you play that song, I remember being happy. I remember feeling loved. I remember—" She looked up at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 3 months there was a spark of recognition in her eyes. "I remember you. Not everything. Not even most things. But I remember you." Michael's face crumpled. He'd been holding it together for so long, being strong for both of them. But this broke him in the best possible way. He covered his face with his hands and just sobbed. Rebecca moved toward him without thinking. It felt natural, right? She wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time since waking up in that hospital, being close to him didn't feel awkward or wrong. It felt like something she'd done 1,000 times before. "I'm sorry," Michael said into her shoulder. "I'm sorry, I know," Rebecca said softly. "I know." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while Michael cried and Rebecca tried to process what was happening. The memories were still fragmented, still incomplete, but they were there. Proof that 7 years of her life hadn't been completely erased, just buried, hidden, waiting for the right key to unlock them. "Tell me about the song," Rebecca said finally. "Tell me why this song matters." Michael pulled back, wiping his eyes. He was smiling through the tears, really smiling for the first time in months. "It was playing on our first date," he said. "At that jazz club downtown. You remember, the one with the terrible lighting and watered-down drinks? This song came on and you lit up, said it was your favorite. I'd never heard it before that night, but I learned to play it for you. Surprised you with it at our wedding." As he talked, Rebecca could almost see it, could almost feel the memory solidifying in her mind. Not fully formed, but more than it had been. Like a photograph slowly developing. "Play it again," she said. "Keep playing it." So Michael did. He played it over and over while Rebecca closed her eyes and let the music work its magic. And with each repetition, the fragments became a little clearer, the images a little sharper, the feelings a little stronger. She saw their first kiss in the rain outside her apartment, saw him proposing on a beach somewhere, so nervous he was shaking, saw their wedding, small and intimate, with sunflowers everywhere because they were her favorite, saw 1,000 tiny moments that made up a life together. Not all of it came back. Large chunks were still missing, still lost to the accident and the brain injury, but enough came back. Enough to remember that she'd loved this man, that she'd chosen him, that they'd built something beautiful together. "I can't remember everything," Rebecca said when he finally stopped playing. "There are still huge gaps. But Michael, I remember loving you. I don't just know it because people told me or because I saw photos. I actually remember the feeling. How you made me feel safe and happy and home." Michael took her hands in his, holding them like they were the most precious things in the world. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." But Rebecca shook her head. "No, it's not enough, not yet. But it's a start. The music didn't fix everything overnight. That's not how real life works, no matter how much we want it to. But it changed things. It gave them something they'd been missing for 3 long months. Hope." After that Saturday afternoon, Michael played the song every evening. It became their ritual. He'd sit at the piano after dinner and play while Rebecca would close her eyes and let the memories come. Sometimes they came in a rush, fragments and feelings flooding her mind all at once. Other times just a trickle, a single image, a half-remembered conversation, the echo of a laugh. Dr. Stevens, the cognitive therapist, was fascinated when Rebecca told her what was happening. She explained that music often lives in different parts of the brain than other memories, that it can create pathways to locked information that regular therapy couldn't reach. She encouraged Rebecca to keep listening, keep trying, but warned her not to expect everything to return. "Some memories might be lost forever," Dr. Stevens said gently, "and that's okay. You're not trying to become who you were before the accident. You're figuring out who you are now." That stuck with Rebecca, who she was now. Because the truth was, she wasn't the same person who'd gotten into that car 3 months ago. How could she be? She'd been through something that changed her fundamentally. And maybe that was okay. The memories that did come back were strange. Not chronological. Not complete. She'd remember their honeymoon in Paris, but not what they'd done the day before the wedding. She'd remember adopting Mr. Whiskers, but not the name of their first apartment together. Her brain was like a puzzle with random pieces scattered across the table, some fitting together perfectly and others just missing entirely. But the feelings, those came back stronger every day. The love she'd felt for Michael wasn't just a concept anymore. It was real, present, growing again, like a plant that had been dormant through winter finally pushing through the soil. 6 weeks after the breakthrough with the piano, Rebecca moved out of the guest room. It felt right, natural. She woke up one morning and realized she wanted to be close to Michael, wanted to fall asleep beside him, wanted to wake up and see his face first thing. He'd been so careful that first night, staying on his side of the bed, not wanting to pressure her. But Rebecca had rolled over and rested her head on his chest, right where it apparently used to belong, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She could hear his heartbeat steady and strong, and she remembered. Maybe not the specific moments they'd slept like this before, but the feeling of safety it brought, of home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. The first time she'd said it since the accident. The first time she'd meant it from the heart, not just because she thought she should. She felt Michael's sharp intake of breath. Felt his arms tighten around her. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never stopped. Things got easier after that. Not perfect. They still had hard days. Days when Rebecca would get frustrated because she couldn't remember something important. Days when Michael would reference a memory she didn't have, and they'd both feel that familiar ache of loss. But they were learning to navigate it together. Rebecca started going back to work part-time. She'd been a graphic designer before the accident, and surprisingly, those skills hadn't been affected. Her hands remembered how to use the software even when her mind couldn't remember specific projects. Her boss was understanding, letting her ease back in slowly. She reconnected with friends, though those relationships were complicated. Her best friend Amy came over for dinner one night, and it was wonderful and awkward at the same time. Amy remembered their entire friendship, could reference inside jokes and shared experiences that Rebecca had no memory of, but they were building something new, something that honored the past while accepting the present. Michael's family was patient too. His mom would tell stories about Rebecca from before the accident, not to make her feel bad about not remembering, but to help her understand who she'd been. His younger brother would show her videos on his phone from family gatherings, and sometimes Rebecca would see herself in those videos and think, that looks like someone having fun, like she was watching a stranger. The doctor said it was, remarkable how much she'd recovered. Dr. Martinez admitted she hadn't expected this level of memory return. She credited the music therapy, but also Rebecca's determination and Michael's unwavering support. Not every brain injury story had this kind of progress, but Rebecca knew she'd never get it all back. There would always be gaps, always be moments lost to the accident, and she had to make peace with that. Had to accept that the person she was now was a combination of who she'd been before the accident and who she'd become after it. On their 5th wedding anniversary, 11 months after the accident, they decided to renew their vows. It wasn't about replacing the wedding she couldn't remember. It was about honoring the journey they'd been on, about making a new memory together. They kept it simple. Just family and close friends in her parents' backyard, the same place they'd gotten married the first time. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress, not white. This wasn't about recreating the past. This was about celebrating the present and looking toward the future. Michael's brother, who was good with a guitar, played their song, the jazz standard that had unlocked everything. As the familiar melody filled the air, Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks. Happy tears this time, grateful tears. When it was time for vows, Michael went first. 5 years ago, I promised to love you in sickness and in health, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I had no idea how much those words would mean. This year tested us in ways I never imagined. But Rebecca, you fought your way back to me, not because you had to, but because you chose to. And watching you fight, watching you try, watching you fall in love with me all over again has been the greatest honor of my life. So today I'm making the same promise I made 5 years ago. I will love you, in every circumstance, through every challenge, for all of my days. Rebecca took a shaky breath. She'd written her vows carefully, wanting to get them right. Michael, I can't remember the first time I told you I loved you. I can't remember our first wedding. I can't remember a lot of things. But here's what I do know. I know that when you play our song, I feel safe. I know that your laugh makes me smile even on my worst days. I know that you waited for me when you didn't know if I'd ever come back. And I know that I want to spend the rest of my life making new memories with you. Memories I'll never forget. So today I'm not just renewing old vows. I'm making new ones. I choose you, Michael. Not because I remember promising to love you 5 years ago, but because I'm promising it right now. Today. Tomorrow. Always. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Even Mr. Whiskers, who Rebecca's mom was holding, seemed to understand the moment was important. After the ceremony, they danced. Of course they danced. To their song with everyone watching, and Rebecca let the music wash over her. She still didn't remember their first dance at their original wedding. Maybe she never would. But this dance, this moment, this she'd remember forever. Later that night back at home, Michael played the song one more time. Rebecca sat beside him on the piano bench, her head on his shoulder. "Do you think you'll ever get tired of hearing this?" she asked. "Never," Michael said simply. "This song gave you back to me. I'll play it every day for the rest of our lives if you want." Rebecca smiled. "Maybe not every day, but often, because you're right. This song did give me back. Or maybe it gave me forward, gave us forward." She thought about how far they'd come, from that terrible night on the highway to this moment of peace and love and hope. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been painful and frustrating and heartbreaking, but they'd made it through together. The accident had taken her memories, but it couldn't take her future. Couldn't take her capacity to love or be loved. Couldn't take the choice she made every single day to build a life with this man beside her. Some people might say they got their happy ending. But Rebecca knew better. This wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. A second chance. A reminder that love isn't just about remembering the past. It's about choosing each other in the present. It's about facing the future together, whatever it might bring. "Play it one more time," Rebecca whispered. And as Michael's fingers found the keys, as the familiar melody filled their home, Rebecca closed her eyes and felt grateful. Grateful for music that could unlock doors. Grateful for a man who never gave up. Grateful for a love that proved stronger than amnesia. The doctors had warned Michael that she might never remember him. And in a way, they were right. She'd never remember everything, but she'd remembered enough. And more importantly, she'd chosen to fall in love all over again. That was better than any memory could ever be.